Hi, I'm Josh Hutchinson, and she's Sarah Jack. Welcome to Witch Hunt Podcast.
Thanks for introducing us. Are you excited for Podcasthon?
Could you remind me what that is again?
Podcasthon is podcasters uniting for good and impact. This week, March 15th through the 21st, every podcast can use their platform to talk about a charity that's important to them, to give them a wider audience. Listener, if you want to learn more about Podcasthon, go to podcasthon.org, and you'll see our nonprofit and witch hunts featured with the other charities.
Oh, that's great. Does that mean we're doing an episode every day this week?
Yes, we are, because we have a whole story to tell about witch hunting. But most podcasts are going to participate with one episode during the 15th through the 21st.
Oh, I see. You know, when you first consider the infamous Salem Witch Trials, it may seem like a tall tale or an open and shut case.
Witch hunting is a story that is bigger than just Salem. And with our podcast, we pull back each layer of that story to show that witch hunts aren't a tall tale and they are not an open and shut case.
Right. One minute you think you know the truth.
But then the next minute, you realize you don't know the half of it.
Life isn't black and white, and witch hunts are proof of that because they're still happening today.
That's right. So March 15th through the 21st, we're telling that whole story and talking about ending witch hunts.
Literal witch hunts, where the fear of witchcraft drives someone to accuse another person of causing harm through witchcraft.
In this first episode, I'd like to talk about our nonprofit and witch hunts and how it started. But first, I have a question for you, Josh.
Oh, great. What is it?
Do you remember that article that I brought to your attention just after we started the podcast? The one about witchcraft belief around the world?
Oh, absolutely. That was the one by economist Boris Gershman. He came on our show about 2 years ago, and that was a really great episode where he talked about his research. He talked about the giant data set that he used, which he pulled from a series of surveys by the Pew Research Center.
It's so informative to look at the stats that he has brought together.
Yeah, here are some of the stats. Boris analyzed data on 95 countries, and he found that approximately 40% of people globally believe in harmful witchcraft, which is defined as the ability to cast harmful curses or spells or use the evil eye. And the prevalence ranges from 9% in Sweden to 90% in countries like Tunisia. And what might surprise some, but shouldn't, is 16% of Americans, which is nearly 1 in 6, believe in this harmful witchcraft.
When we say 40% of people believe in witchcraft, that's 40% of people in the world believing in curses, the evil eye, or the ability for spells to cause actual harm.
It's one thing believing in it as a possibility, but knowing in one's mind that it's real and feeling threatened by it is another thing entirely.
Witch hunts exist because, unfortunately, acting on these beliefs often are crossing a line, and that line crossing harms innocent people.
Mm, that's right. I remember this UN report came out in 2023 about the harmful practices being done against people accused of witchcraft. And it said that the victims are often people in vulnerable situations, including women, children, persons with disabilities, older persons, persons with albinism, and persons with dementia.
And our story that we're sharing during the Podcasthon 2025 is going to talk about who those victims are across several countries and what's happening to them.
Yeah, a witchcraft accusation can come from anybody in any community, anybody who has the fear of being bewitched. Accusations, as they did in historic witch trials, these days, accusations follow some misfortune, and they often come from one's own family members or close neighbors.
Many times, accusers hold this belief that life is a zero-sum game, and that if one person is getting ahead, then another person has to fall behind. They don't want to be that person who's falling behind. Can you give us an example of that, Josh?
Sure. It reminds me of the case of Catherine Harrison from Connecticut. She prospered, and her neighbors believed that she caused their losses, such as livestock deaths and crop failures, that she only succeeded because they did not.
They were also jealous of her relationships with bees and cows, how easily she could call them.
Hockenham, come Hockenham.
Moo!
And they would come running, the cows, and the bees would just automatically follow her when she approached them. It was amazing. She was so good at her job that they accused her of witchcraft. And her neighbors were so afraid of her, in fact, that over 80 of them signed a petition to return her to jail after she was initially released following questioning.
You know, I first found out about Podcasthon and LinkedIn, and I was just thinking about what a great post she could have posted about her bees or her cows. And then, you're not going to have 80 people on LinkedIn complaining. They're going to share that post. But it's very different when you're looking at somebody's success as attributing to your downfall.
Yeah, I'm
So
thinking about what kind of TikTok videos she could have made about Hockenham, come Hockenham, and all the cows come running.
to hear more stories like Catherine's, you can check out our other podcast series. We have a 101 series covering Connecticut witch trial history, Massachusetts, and the Salem Witch Trials.
Yeah, absolutely. Check out all of those series. You know, when fearful people come together like that, emotions take control of the room and rationality can easily go out the window. And then these accusations are made of people doing impossible things, frankly.
Yeah. And once that accusation is made, I mean, it's out there. It can not, it's already causing harm. The moment the accusation is naming a person, that person is no longer seen as human, but as a source of evil.
Yeah, once they're dehumanized that way, accusers are willing to commit horrific acts of violence, including murder, just to get that evil force out of their community.
The victims are not witches. They are human beings. We also need to realize that the accusers are not monsters. They are humans enacting human behaviors.
What blew me away about our episode with Boris was how he shared ways to actually eliminate witchcraft accusations.
Yeah, he gave us a list of necessary changes for ending witch hunts. And I think that's what's amazing about human rights is there are necessary changes. And isn't it amazing that we have experts like Boris and so many more that can offer change ideas? And let's end witch hunts with some of these changes.
Right. A lot of these changes that he talks about go back to this central point that when people's needs are met, they're less likely to want to scapegoat somebody as a source of their problems because they have fewer problems. And when if there's this social safety net or something to catch you when you fall, when misfortune befalls you, that really keeps you from making these accusations against people.
He gave some great, effective approaches, including building stronger formal institutions like just courts, just police, property rights.
Yeah, he also talked about the need to reduce poverty and vulnerability through the social safety nets that I mentioned. They're so important to keep people's needs met so they aren't looking for outlets of, you know, my needs aren't being met. This person's obviously the one doing it. I need to take care of them and then my needs will be met.
It comes as a surprise to some people that these programs to diminish poverty are things that are going to and violence against women due to witchcraft accusations. Programs that help meet basic needs, whether they're developed, from within the community, local outreach and organizations meeting the needs of their own community, or if neighboring communities are helping to support a community that needs support from the outside. Those programs significantly reduce violence against women and children, and specifically witchcraft accusation related violence.
When you lift people up, they don't have to lash out anymore. So, doing things like addressing the root causes of witchcraft fears rather than the beliefs themselves.
And understanding all of that and implementing the change does take time, but we have to get started now. We need to continue to support programs that are supporting people.
Yeah, these community building strategies are essential for a holistic framework to combat witch hunting. Laws against witchcraft accusations alone will not get the job done. You have to support the people because witchcraft accusations and poverty are so intertwined. You've got to break that cycle.
It's amazing that the beginning of this education for me came out of an article that many of our listeners might have actually looked at. It was during Thanksgiving break of 2022. And, when you see a Pew Research survey come out and it's talking about the evil eye, I think a lot of people probably looked at that. In essence, Boris, took some of that information and with his expertise and research, he provided this comprehensive, data driven analysis of the prevalence, distribution, and correlates of witchcraft beliefs right now, highlighting the complex social functions and the significant costs.
He really emphasized the importance of institutional development and social safety nets as key factors in addressing the harmful consequences of these beliefs. He underscored the need for a nuanced and culturally sensitive approach to tackling this complex issue.
This encounter with Boris's research came about the time we decided to create a nonprofit. After speaking with him, we saw how we could use our podcast to advocate and promote solutions for the witchcraft accusation crisis.
The timing was quite interesting because when we started the podcast, we were really focused on Connecticut witch trials, New England witch trials, other historic witch trials. But about a year before we started the podcast in 2021, the United Nations Human Rights Council issued a resolution number 47 8 that recognizes the issue of the witchcraft accusation violence and urges nations to make all necessary efforts to eliminate the witch hunt violence.
That next year in 2022, 3 organizations joined this advocacy for ending witch hunts, ours and witch hunts, but also the International Network Against Witchcraft Accusations and Ritual Attacks and the International Alliance to End Witch Hunts.
In Witch Hunts is our organization. We started December 2022 that we are advocating for the elimination of witch hunts and we're raising awareness of this crisis because especially in the beginning when we started, when we would talk to people, nobody understood what was going on. Nobody knew about witch hunts still happening in the world. We think here in the West, they're metaphorical, always tied to politics somehow, but they're not. It's person against person
Yeah.
accusing each other of witchcraft.
And sometimes it's because we have this deeply rooted assumption that witch trials were the only witch hunts and those were centuries ago. We don't even recognize the type of accusations that are happening right before our eyes. And one of those that does happen in the US is demonic possession accusations that turn into violent exorcisms resulting in the death of a child or an elderly father. Those are crimes that have been committed recently in the United States.
Yes. And you mentioned the International Network and the International Alliance, and they're both organizations which, as their names imply, bring together people from a lot of different countries, different advocates, academics, people who are involved in local advocacy organizations get together to exchange notes, help each other out, hold seminars and conferences that really get the word out that this is happening and try to enact positive change through advocacy with governments and international bodies like the United Nations.
Yeah, and as you can imagine, there's a lot of legal aspects to this. So there's legal experts who are working on laws, and then sometimes in the court, just like with other human rights cases, working to fight for the rights of the vulnerable in witchcraft accusation violence situations. So we talk about all these things on our podcast with experts, but Josh, should we tell them about our projects, our nonprofit projects?
Absolutely. Let's tell them what End Witch Hunts does.
So, our first project was our Connecticut Witch Trial Exoneration Project, and an exoneration for those who were accused of witchcraft in 17th century colonial Connecticut. The first part of that project has been a success. That first year that we were working with other volunteers on the exoneration of those innocent victims of the Connecticut witch trials, they did receive a bill that absolved them of the crime of witchcraft. Now, that project is focused on creating a monument for them. Connecticut does not have a monument dedicated to the group of individuals that were accused of witchcraft there.
After the Connecticut Witch Trial Exoneration Bill was passed, we started to look at Massachusetts because we know that the Salem convicted have been cleared, they've been exonerated. However, those accused in Boston and convicted in Boston, 8 people convicted there, including 5 women who were hanged, they've never received any kind of recognition like that. No exoneration, no name clearing, no acknowledgement. So we just want them to be recognized. We want to basically have everybody who was accused of witchcraft in Massachusetts, their what they went through. We want that to be acknowledged and recognized that this was an error that happened and these people never should have been prosecuted. And that legislation was proposed in January of this year. It's pending a committee review before it goes to the House floor.
And I hope it makes sense to you, the listeners, why we would do this, because those experiences that Josh was just referring to are the same experiences that men, women, and children are having happen to them in their communities now. Some places it could still be in court. There are some countries where that is the case, but a lot of these are outside the court, but it's still this life disrupting accusation that is a devastation to families. And so when we go back and we recognize and have authority say, these women were innocent, these men who were hanged for witchcraft were innocent, it is taking a stand that we should not be persecuting people for something that's not happening, something that's not provable. Do you have anything to add to that, Josh?
Yeah, I really liked the way you said that. As an example, there's legislation currently under review in the state of Maryland to exonerate people accused and some convicted of witchcraft in the 17th century, again in colonial times in Maryland. And that went before a committee for review this week. They held a hearing on Monday, and you and I testified there. And
We
I
did.
I focused my testimony on the modern situation, letting people know that this exoneration legislation, like you said, Sarah, is so relevant today. It's not just, you know, we want to get justice for the people who deserve justice, which are the victims of the historic witch trials. But we also want to see justice for the victims of modern witch hunts. And we've been told by advocates in different countries, such as Dr. Leo Igwe from the Advocacy for Alleged Witches in Nigeria, that what we do here in America, recognizing these injustices, saying that witch hunts are wrong, really resounds and echoes across the world. People hear that message and imbibe it and say, well, they're saying that what we're doing is wrong, or what I'm thinking of doing is wrong. And maybe it gives people some pause.
Yeah, exactly, Josh. So, our other project is podcasting. We have a lot of fun with it. We do talk a lot on very serious matters, but it's great because we have had over 100 experts, academics, lawyers, politicians, descendants, even someone who experienced witchcraft accusation against their mother. So they're on our show talking about how what their work or their experience is and how it intersects with witchcraft accusations and ending witch hunts. We hope you check out those other episodes.
The project that's really at the core of what we're about in raising awareness and doing advocacy for the elimination of these harmful practices, we call World Without Witch Hunts. That's our platform for amplifying messages from around the world about what's going on and getting people to know the reality of the situation.
So participating in Podcasthon really falls under a couple of our projects, but because of our World Without Witch Hunts effort, when we saw Podcasthon happening, we knew we wanted to be a part of it to get our message out further.
And that's really what we're doing in these 6 episodes for Podcasthon. We're going around the world to talk about different continents and the situations there.
Yeah. Briefly, we mentioned the deaths occurring with exorcisms that become violent here in the US, and that falls under a project called End Spiritual and Ritual Abuse. And currently, with that project, we're just kind of getting familiar with what is happening in the country right now, what has happened in the past decade. How does our legal system look at it? How does the court look at it when it's processing these trials and looking at the charged individuals versus what's happened to a victim? And we're doing that through media reporting and talking to people. And if you have any insight on that or leads from your organization or any type of advocacy or legal work that you do, we would love for you to reach out to us. This is an area that other parts of the world kind of have a lead on us with. There's been great data collected in some other countries around spiritual and ritual abuse. And we'd really like to be able to show what's happening in the US around SARA, spiritual and ritual abuse.
Absolutely. And for updates on all of our projects and more, subscribe to our newsletter. You'll get exclusive content about witch hunt podcasts and about historic witch trials, as well as updates on the modern accusations.
Yeah. That comes out weekly. It's cool because we put photos in there from our interviews, or if we've been out giving a presentation, or if we've had an event, there'll be updates.
Another thing that we do as in witch hunts is attend important conferences. Last year, we went to 2 important conferences in September. We went to the Magic and Witchcraft conference in York, and we spoke about the modern witch hunt crisis there. And then we went to a conference, the International Conference on Witchcraft and Human Rights, which was entirely dedicated to the modern witch hunting situation and brought in advocates and leaders from around the world. And those two experiences were so amazing. We're really looking forward to getting back to some conferences this year, including Magic and Witchcraft Conference 2025. I'm so excited. It's in June. It's in York, England. And the subject is, what is a witch? How more exciting could you get of a topic than it's like the central question of witch hunting, or one of the central questions to answer? What even is a witch? What do people believe witches can do and who they are? So we've submitted to talk there about what is a witch in the context of today's witch hunts, something that we've done several episodes about, and we have, a good base of research to do that talk. And we hope that you'll support our GoFundMe so we can go there to spread awareness of the modern crisis of witchcraft accusations, and also to learn many more facts about what is a witch from the historical witch trials, things that we can use on this podcast. We'll be meeting guests that will be on the podcast in the future, I'm sure. And just as we did with our conferences last year, really be rounding out our coming calendar for the second half of the year with people that we meet in June.
Awesome. Thanks for talking about our GoFundMe. We have a QR code that we'll put up here on the video and a link in the description of this episode. And thank you for helping us get there this year, too. I want to talk about that conference, the other conference that you brought up, Josh, the one for September, the International Conference on Albinism at Lancaster University.
Yeah, Lancaster University is hosting this conference. It's commemorating the 10-year anniversary of the UN Human Rights Council's mandate on the rights of persons with albinism. And it'll be going September 16th to 18th this year.
Yeah, they're addressing some key challenges that persons with albinism face in their life, including skin cancer from the climate change threats. They have educational, employment, and community inclusion barriers, and they face discrimination fueled by supernatural beliefs and misinformation. And they experience and die from ritual attacks and violence. And we're actually going to tell more of that story on tomorrow's episode.
Yes, we are. And the conference will be emphasizing the needs for enhanced data collection, stronger government protections, international cooperation, grassroots collaborations, and cross-movement partnerships.
These conferences bring together diverse participants. There are albinism advocates and human rights defenders, medical researchers on genetics, ophthalmology, dermatology, oncology, arts, humanities, and social science scholars, and interdisciplinary experts.
Yeah. You can help in witch hunts by volunteering or donating to our projects.
Tomorrow, our episode discusses contemporary witch hunts across African countries based on the conversations that we've had in our previous episodes. So it's current information and experiences, and you don't want to miss that. This is a very under-addressed issue affecting communities throughout the continent.
And you want to be sure to tune in, because you do not want to miss the update we received from Dr. Leo Igwe in Nigeria on what Advocacy for Alleged Witches is doing. There's very powerful stories in there, so do not miss it. Thank you so much for joining us for Podcasthon 2025. Have a great today and a beautiful tomorrow.